heard that, or you?
I have no idea.
Upstairs, and I was comfortable when I got dressed this morning.
As soon as it's set up as a meeting, I don't have an actual agenda.
Oh, on Main Street?
Probably were lazy and took you over.
So you want to go ahead and call this meeting to order?
No, it's not a big deal.
Go ahead and get started here, and I believe Ken is going to bring us up to date and sort of a general overview of at least part of this unified code. So while I hope there will be time probably in the future for a lot of specific questions, perhaps down the road, I guess we need to try to get this overview and get as much as we can today. And then later we'll get into absolute specifics.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. If we can bring up UDC update. This is what I suspect will be the first of many meetings between the staff, consultant, and city council in regards to the Unified Development Code. You had asked several months ago that our office provide an update on the Unified Code, and that's what this presentation is about this afternoon. Generally speaking, the Unified Development Code is going to consist of 9 chapters. The first 5 chapters is the zoning portion. Chapter 6 would be the glossary, which will cover not only the zoning, but also development regulations. Chapter 1 is general provision, legal authority, intent and purpose, general administration, codes that we're adopting that are part of or companion with the Unified Code, such as the International Property Maintenance Code, some of the floodplain codes and maps through FEMA. Those are the types of things where we reference other codes. The state of Georgia building codes, the international building codes that the state of Georgia has adopted. Instead of including all of that language within our local code, we're adopting those by reference, and that's sort of the kind of things that are in chapter 1. It talks about the council, community development director, building official, planning commission, things of that nature. Chapter 2 is zoning districts and land uses. This is where it talks about all the current zoning districts, our proposed new zoning districts, and things of that nature, special purpose districts, combining zones. You will note that, and it's hard to see on even on the screen, but at table 2-2 within the draft text, we have a conversion, if you will, from the previous zoning to our proposed new zoning districts. We are proposing to delete a couple of the current zoning districts. PSC Planned Shopping Center, we propose to delete that zoning ordinance. There are only 3 parcels of land in the entirety of the city of Canton that are zoned PSC. Those properties can be accommodated through a general commercial zoning or through a planned development business office or planned development mixed use zoning. And we felt like, in working with our Citizens Committee Planning Commission, that since there's only so few pieces of property that are zoned PSC Planned Shopping Center, we could delete that zoning district. We also propose to delete the ERC Etowah River Corridor zoning district. That was done as an overlay, sort of, in the current zoning ordinance. That district has no permitted uses, everything is conditional use. We would propose to do away with that and go back to a more of a conventional zoning, such as a commercial or a light industrial or residential zoning. There are other avenues for protection of the Etowah River in that corridor that are available through some state requirements and things of that nature. We've addressed some of that in a future chapter that will be part of our development regulations, which will be in Chapter 7, which will be natural resources. The current office institutional, as it's written, is another district that has no permitted uses. Everything is a conditional use. That is not a good idea to have a district that has no permitted uses. We propose to do away with office institutional zoning under that format. We do propose to have an office institutional zoning in our new unified code that really is more similar to what one would think of as an office professional district. We are proposing to add an office residential transition ORT district that would serve as an in-between an OIOP, commercial and a residential. The current zoning ordinance for the office professional does not allow for a structure to be used for residential purposes unless there is an office that is within that structure. Some of the properties that are currently zoned office professional are 100% residential uses. Those are legal non-conforming uses, but under our current zoning ordinance, if those homes become vacant for 60 days, that structure can no longer be used for residential purposes. The only residential can be when it's 50% or less of the total square footage of the structure for residential purposes with an office. The current way that our code is written sort of constrains those areas where it's zoned. That's the reason we felt like going with and recommending for council's consideration an ORT, Office Residential Transition Zoning District, that would allow for residential uses as well as office uses, whether it's in the same structure or within that same zoning district boundary. It truly is a transition area, transition zone from commercial areas to residential areas. We are proposing changing the names of the zoning districts from example RE in the current ordinance, which is a 1 acre lot, to an R40, which is a minimum 40,000 square foot lot. We also are proposing to change our planned development zoning district. The current PUD zoning district basically has two categories: 25 to 99 acre category, then larger than 100 acres. At that size for PUD zoning, that sort of encourages new development, greenfield development. What is in the current draft Unified Development Code is a planned development district with multiple subcategory headings: planned development residential, planned development business office, planned development mixed use, planned development traditional neighborhood development. We are recommending for your consideration going to a 5 acre minimum lot size for any of the planned development zoning districts. We're looking more at encouraging the use of planned development for infill type development and for redevelopment opportunities within the city, instead of what most folks think of in terms of planned development, PUD, a large master plan mixed use development that is all new greenfield type development. With that being said, you know, that is kind of a quick overview, the bulk of the changes that we're proposing within just the zoning district designations and things of that nature. We are proposing that the city of Canton adopt a property maintenance code. The city currently does not have that adopted. Our code enforcement officer and others have requested the city council consider adopting this international property maintenance code for assistance with code enforcement issues. The building codes generally are written for new construction and do not necessarily deal with existing structures and issues. And there have been some issues that have come up with code enforcement Officer Johnson, in which if the city would have had the International Property Maintenance Code adopted, his job as far as getting some things done, citations, going to court, would have been much easier instead of a convoluted way of trying to use building codes for the same end result. We have specific language, and the property maintenance code is referenced in section 1.10. We do have language at chapter 2, section 2.02.06b, in which all existing conditions of approval, whether it's a condition of master plan approval, condition of zoning approval, all of that will carry forward with that property into this new unified code and with our new zoning map that will be a part of the unified code. Our permitted uses table, which is table 2-6, this is an amendment, if you will. Permitted uses table is based upon the American Planning Association standard land use classification code system that has 5 layers of levels of permitted uses. All of our permitted uses listed in this table do have a specific definition and are contained within our glossary within chapter 6. Part of the issue with our current zoning ordinance is in the text, there's a listing of permitted uses, and then towards the back of the current zoning ordinance, there's a chart or a table of permitted uses, and these two areas do not match. There are inconsistencies even within the lists, and then there are inconsistencies within the chart in the existing zoning ordinance. We have consolidated all of the development standards into one table, which you can see at table 2-7. In chapter 3, in our parking regulations section, we have amended that at 3.03.04, in which we are allowing and encouraging bioretention to be utilized within parking lot landscaping. That will reduce the amount of impervious surface. It's good for the environment, if you will, less of a heat island, that sort of thing. Also, within our parking guidelines, It is recommended the council consider having a maximum number of parking spaces besides a minimum number of parking spaces. A lot of communities across the country are going to a parking maximum. A lot of retail places will build more than what they need, and in an effort to try to reduce the amount of impervious surface, stormwater, that sort of thing, we're looking at having a maximum parking limit besides having a minimum amount of parking. That is listed at within table 3-3. At 3.0406, we also have language in regards to shared parking and encouraging commercial development to look more at shared parking opportunities. Some of these thoughts and ideas, such as bioretention, maximum parking, shared parking, are things that would help the city of Kent when it comes to grant opportunities, additional funding through ARC or Georgia DOT. Yes, sir.
Excuse me. It'd be easier to follow you if you give us the 3-8 page number or whatever. I'm trying to match up with you, what you're going here, you're jumping around. So would you give us the 3-8, whatever it might be that you're referring to? Because moving along pretty quick, which I appreciate, but I'm trying to find your charts, and sometimes the charts are not where these numbers are.
The last one, I believe, was 3-16. Is that shared parking? At the bottom.
I apologize for not having page numbers with this.
3-16, that's page number what?
Page 3-16 is the page number.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I got it, so, okay. Thank you.
Another item which is contained on page 3-20 at section 3.0503 is specific language in regards to the display of property numbering. In discussions with our Citizens Committee, Planning Commission, everyone had a true sense that there was a lack of a standardization, if you will, of display of numbering, things of that nature, in an effort to assist and, God forbid, those emergency situations, police, fire, having a requirement for property numbering would help out in those types of situations.
Ken?
Yes, sir.
Just a question. With the display of property numbering, if this thing is adopted, will that mean that certain residents in the city will have to make changes in their current display?
That would be envisioned over time. It would not be immediate.
And it would do, we'd give them advice on what they need to do and when
Correct.
it's time to do it. Okay, thank you.
It doesn't specify or mandate this has to be done at this point in time. All new developments that would come in would meet this display of property numbering. The next item, which is a amendment, is within the sign portion of chapter 3. It is page 3-35. table 3-7. Our current regulations specify either a 32 or 50 square foot copy area on freestanding signs, depending upon where the property is located. We're recommending City Council consider increasing that to a uniform 64 square feet in regards to the freestanding signs.
Ken,
Yes, sir.
page 3-37. Mention weekend directional signs.
Yes, sir.
Do we currently have anything similar to this, or we have absolutely nothing?
It's not really addressed within the City of Canton ordinance at the present time. Weekend directional signs do go up and that sort of thing. This is something in the language, since there are a lot of them are being put up and in use, and we have limited staff towards enforcement of no weekend directionals. We have looked at some of the language that Cherokee County has in their sign regulations in regards to weekend directional, putting them up on Friday afternoons, taking them down before a sweep of the city on Monday mornings, if you will, keep them out of the right of way, off telephone poles, that sort of thing, which is how Cherokee County handles weekend directionals.
How about political signs that get on the corner, that might have 20 political signs on the same corner?
By the Georgia Supreme Court, we cannot address anything related to content of any sign. So we make no distinction, if you will, between a political sign or anything else. All we are doing is regulating the number of signs per piece of property, the size of the signs per piece of property. Weekend directionals are a little bit different, which are more geared towards real estate sales and that sort of thing. There are some avenues through accessory signs for political signs, that sort of thing. But you know, as far as content, that sort of thing, political signs that generally most governments take a hands-off approach to regulation, if you will.
Ken, what about the sign acrobats, spinning guys and stuff on the sidewalk?
We still have no allowance for that within these regulations. If that's something that the mayor and council would.
You have no allowance for it.
In the proposed.
But you mean we're not addressing it? When you say
Correct.
no allowance, that doesn't mean we're forbidden.
That's what.
They're not prohibited. That's not.
This is a permitted uses code. If it's not listed, then it's prohibited.
Does that include signs on vehicles about new cars parked on corners and stuff like that?
I think somebody walk around.
Could you repeat that, Mr. Mayor? I was,
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's not a sign.
It's a person holding a board.
T-shirt.
Person expressing free speech under the Constitution of the United States.
Ken,
But we need to think about it. I mean,
I'd argue everything does that.
well, but if the council wants to prohibit them, I think we need to specifically prohibit them, because I think you're gonna have a problem unless you address it specifically.
Your question was about vehicles?
Yeah, is that about, about parking the vehicle at a corner with big signs across?
That is signage. They should get permit or have property owner authorization to place those.
And they need to move it around.
they do.
If you leave it there too long, it's a sign. It's just where you put the sign, so it needs to move around.
Ken?
Yes, sir.
Back to that spinning sign issue. That needs to be put in here because a lot of them are standing right on the curb. They got about a 6 or 8 foot piece of cardboard or whatever it is spinning, people are driving right down that side. We're gonna have somebody either veer into another car, or we're gonna have somebody get spun out because they're spinning their signs and have somebody get by.
We'll work with officers.
It's a whole new way of advertising, but it sure is a dangerous one.
And we have tried to work with Officer Johnson on that in regards to that, because our current sign regulations doesn't allow anything within the road right of way and that sort of thing. All of those, and I guess we'll define those as human signs. And have a definition for a human sign. But we have tried to work with Officer Johnson in regards to those to make sure that they're back behind the right of way. That's why all of a sudden you see a big path behind the sidewalk in front of the Little Caesars and all of that is because those folks have moved back behind the power poles and kind of off the right of way. Same for the gold places in the Eagle Shopping Center. Those folks are way towards the back. When they first started up, they were on the edge of the sidewalk closest to the pavement and vehicular traffic, and we informed all of them that they had to be outside of the right-of-way.
One other point is, you touched on it a minute ago, because of code enforcement. And right now, we don't have personnel to be able to handle all the different issues we're putting in here under the chapter 5.06.03. One I'm interested in is the abandoned buildings, like old gas stations, and that's a violation of 5.115.02. Unsafe. Do we have something in here now? It's in this, looks good. But do we have something right now before we approve it?
No.
So we definitely need to have this put in.
This gets back to what I referenced at the beginning about the International Property Maintenance Code. That is a part of the International Property Maintenance Code. And those are the kinds of issues with the building codes, the ICC building codes and the building codes that are adopted by the state of Georgia don't really address those types of issues. Those are more for new construction, whereas International Property Maintenance Code addresses abandoned buildings, unkempt buildings, some life safety issues that Officer Johnson has run across internally with some structures, and how door locks are handled internally in some homes that the building codes don't address, but International Property Maintenance Code does.
Key point is historical buildings or older buildings that are considered historical, you know, is that addressed in here as far as they're vacant?
There's another presentation when I'm done that the consultant, if we have time, is going to get into our proposed historic district guidelines and things of nature that would answer your specific question. It's section 3.0509, and I believe I'm going to be jumping backwards on this one. I thought I had everything lined up. In regards to LED lighting, I'm trying to find that page number.
About 329.
That is page 3-29, yes, sir. LED, LCD is not currently addressed in our sign regulations. We are proposing that be allowed on the reader boards, gas signs, temperature signs, things of that nature. That's addressed very briefly in our current regs, but this is a little more detailed and specific as it relates to changeable copy and that sort of thing.
You know, like, you got a rolling message on the bottom versus a digital sign that either flips? Or
Yes.
just has a time, like a clock, like down in the corner?
Yes, this would be a smaller, like 12 square foot area, like a reader board that someone could put some changeable copy of scroll across the bottom. Today's special, Crown Chuck, $1.29, you know, something of that nature, that instead of having the whole freestanding sign be an LED sign that has graphics and a large copy area that's constantly changing. We're kind of trying to do a mix and match, if you will. There was a lot of opposition in regards to allowing full signage to be LED or LCD backlit.
Is that going backwards? I mean, are we gonna get a Riverstone or some other street just flashing lights everywhere? I mean,
No, sir, I don't think so, because it's such a small area that would be involved with LCD and the LED light.
what about the big ones that you might have noticed in Atlanta? The billboards are so bright, it's almost blinding.
This proposed regulation would not allow those. This only allows a 12 square foot area of a reader board type part of a freestanding sign that is more of a traditional sign. It could be that LED or LCD portion of a sign.
Do we have any in the city that we're doing?
There are a few LED, LCD signs that have been approved recently through variances. First, Franklin Financial, I think, on Riverstone has one. Racetrack out by Kmart has one for gasoline. The proposed racetrack, if they ever tear the old one down and start building the new one down near Prominence on Marietta Highway, got variance approval for some LED or LCD lighting of some of their signage down there. There are a couple of them, but they've been very small in nature in regards to the square footage that has been approved.
We've done away with the old portable thing that you could drag in and park in a parking lot that has blinking lights across it with a message under.
Yes, sir. Those were done away with years and years ago through the Canton zoning ordinance. Section 4.02 is the next section. That is at page 4-1. This is an amendment we're proposing in regards to accessory use, accessory building setback limits. Our current ordinance specifies that all accessory structures, accessory uses, be set back the same as the principal building. This is the only zoning ordinance I've ever seen in my entire working career that has that type of a restriction.
So what's the change?
We're proposing that the accessory structures or buildings be allowed to be built behind the front facade of a house on the side or a rear yard area, but allow those to be within 10 feet of that side or rear property boundary, which is almost like a standard accessory building setback that you see in just about all zoning ordinances.
And why would you want this as opposed to just the accessory building being to the rear of the building? I guess that's the question I have, because if you're driving down subdivision, you could have an accessory building, maybe one of these little metal 8x10 sitting out the side of your house, and it would really show if you had a bunch of those going down the subdivision street. But if it's behind it, normally you wouldn't be able to, it wouldn't be visible.
The current regs allows accessory buildings in the side or rear yard area.
Oh,
They
okay.
just have to meet whatever that zoning district principal setback is. For instance, if it's a 35-foot front yard or a 25-foot side yard setback, the accessory building's got to meet the same thing as the principal building. We're proposing reducing the setback down to 10 feet for the accessory buildings instead of meeting the same setback as the principal building. If
Most, say, newer subdivisions, the side setbacks are generally what? I mean,
a lot of them are 10 feet.
Already?
Inside the city of Canton, yes, sir.
okay.
Because of the PUD zoning, conditions, zoning approval, things of that nature. If it's the mayor and council's direction that accessory buildings only be allowed in the rear yard area, that's fine. We just, in putting this together, looked at the current regulation in regards to the setback limits and recommended that that be reduced from our current ordinance to something a little bit less.
You went in between, so you had the accessory building no further forward than the rear of the main building.
If that's the language that the mayor and council want, no problem. We can do that.
Right now, you could be anywhere on the lot. Doesn't have to be behind the house. It just has to meet.
It cannot extend beyond the front facade.
It does have to be in the back now.
Well, it can't, it can be up beside the
Well, how
house.
it can't be
What they're
in front of the
talking
house.
about is having that imaginary line from the rear of the principal structure.
But the proposed
From there
ordinance,
back.
the proposed ordinance, would it allow it in the front yard?
No,
Right, so we're not changing that.
no,
Where it's located is not changed. It's just how close it can get to the side,
correct.
property line.
There are
It can
some,
get closer.
some districts like the RE or proposed R40 that has a 50-foot setback. That on a 1 acre lot might present a problem with a principal residential structure, and then you want to have a detached garage or something of that nature and have to meet that same 50 feet.
Okay, I know we're short on time here, so we need to speed it up because we do have a presentation, I think, and then the 5 o'clock meeting.
Now, I would recommend that it be no further forward than the rear of the house. That puts them a little bit set back from the, so it's not flush with the house.
But then you have the detached garage problem. You're making somebody put their garage behind their house. If they want to have a detached garage. That's what you have to think about.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, council members, section 4.0202, which is contained on page 4-2. It is recommended the mayor and council consider the allowance of accessory dwelling units within single-family zoning districts. This would meet a couple of objectives of affordable housing, an allowance for in-law suites, children that can't find a job, if you will, that sort of thing. Say there's a senior that might need a little extra income and could have a rental unit that they could keep paying their insurance and all the prescription drugs, things of that nature. Again, we would offer this up for y'all's consideration as to whether you would want to move that way in the allowance of an accessory dwelling unit within our single-family residential zoning districts. Again, this is something that would put the city of Canton in a favorable light in regards to certain types of grants, loan applications through ARC, the state of Georgia, and federal government. But there again, something for consideration. 4.02.03 on page 4-3, continuing over in page 4-4, home occupation sections. We have amended that. We have added a whole section in which certain uses would be prohibited as a home occupation. Our current ordinance does not have a section that deals with prohibited uses. Chapter 4, Section 4-03 in its entirety, which is multiple pages, we have added additional requirements for specific permitted uses, such as religious institution, which would talk about accessory structures, things of that nature. Adult-oriented businesses, bed and breakfasts, cemeteries, child care facilities. That whole section is one that I would ask each of you to spend a little more time in going through and over. As I said, this is going to be the first of many meetings that we will have in regards to this. Section 4.03.15, which is manufactured housing. Our current zoning ordinance, I'm trying to find page number. Our current ordinance does not address manufactured housing, modular housing, whatsoever, other than just a definition. We have put some language and we're recommending a MHP, manufactured home park zoning district that would accommodate manufactured housing. This is in keeping with the latest Georgia Supreme Court ruling in regards to manufactured housing.
So once a manufactured house is moved off the property, they can't come back and put one on there unless it meets whatever criteria.
That's correct.
Even if it's a,
Under our current zoning.
but under this, they would, what if it's a business, they got multiple lots in a park?
Yes, sir.
I mean, once somebody moves out, are they gonna be able to replace that?
Yes, sir.
Well, they still got to meet this.
They have to meet all the criteria and requirements. And there again, we specifically added the section in regards to manufactured housing because of the Georgia Supreme Court ruling in regards to manufactured housing. This puts our proposed zoning ordinance in compliance with the latest Supreme Court rulings as it relates to manufactured housing.
Ken, could I ask, now, this is related to homes, but what about, there are companies that do manufactured, buildings for businesses that they bring them in, does that address that as well?
You're talking about a industrialized commercial building, which is something entirely different than or are you talking about
You're talking about rolling off.
that is something entirely different that is not appropriate to this whole section with manufactured housing in the MHP zoning
They
district.
also do homes as well, so how to address that? Say, I've seen them on TV, they're bringing in for like 10,000 square feet, put them together. Is that going to have to be in a community?
It will have to be on property that's zoned MHP. according to what the Georgia Supreme Court ruling specified.
Yeah, back up just a minute there. You can put a pre-manufactured or something home in a regular subdivision under the law, can't you?
According to the latest Georgia Supreme Court ruling, you can restrict them to a certain zoning district, and that's the only place that they can go.
Is this in place whole buildings or segments that are manufactured somewhere else and put on the side?
It covers all of them from what I've looked at with that latest Georgia Supreme Court ruling. It contradicts what you're talking about, the previous Supreme Court ruling, which said that modular homes, manufactured homes, as long as it was on a permanent foundation, could go in any residential zoning district. There's been a newer Georgia Supreme Court ruling that has kind of reversed and flipped that allows local governments to restrict manufactured housing to a specific zoning district. And if council members want, I'll email you the court citation on that. It came out of the city of Bainbridge, Georgia. And we're following the guidelines that were laid out in the Bainbridge zoning ordinance and what the Georgia Supreme Court indicated was legal.
Yeah, I know previously and many years ago, if it had a certain HUD certification or whatever, I mean, you could actually put those things in any places.
You're thinking about that old Coweta County Supreme Court case from about 1990, if I'm not mistaken. But this city of Bainbridge case that went all the way through the Georgia Supreme Court has come about in about the last 5 or 6 years, best of my recollection, and sort of reverses our original Coweta County ruling. Section 4.03.16, which is on page 4-14 to begin with, and there's several pages of it. This is some of the specific details in regards to our proposed PD plan development district.
Anything new there?
As I mentioned earlier, the current PUD zoning only has 2 categories, if you will, 25 to 99 acres and larger than 100 acres. We're proposing a minimum site area of 5 acres, thinking in terms of trying to shift thought away from using PD zoning for new greenfield development to more of a opportunity for infill and redevelopment opportunities within the city. The PD district would require a master plan. It would, each case would require coming before mayor and council for approval in regards to the specifics of that master plan. But this section in chapter 4 gives all the specific details for the subcategories. 4.03 25 is on page 4-35. This is all of the specifics in regards to communication towers. We're calling it wireless telecommunication facilities. This is an amendment to our current regulations, and this brings everything up to speed in regards to the latest amendments to the FCC Wireless Facilities Communications Telecommunications Act. Section 4.04. page 4-46. This is more the specifics in regards to temporary uses. Within Chapter 5, roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission, Board of Zoning Appeals, Community Development Department, Administration of the Unified Development Code is gone into in more detail. And the last thing in regards to an update for the zoning is Chapter 6 is our glossary definitions chapter, of which this includes definitions for the zoning portion. Once the development regulations portion is completed, this chapter will be increased and enlarged to include all of the definitions out of the development regulations portion. The development regulations we are working on be 3 chapters. 1 chapter has been completed in draft form. I've completed a review of the 2nd chapter, awaiting the city engineer's review of that chapter. And then the final chapter will have to be reviewed and gone over. We'll meet with our Citizens Advisory Committee, Planning Commission throughout all of the process. With that, and I know I've been quite lengthy, I know all of you have thousands of questions. This is what I think will be the first of many meetings in regards to this. I will let each and every one of the council members know that I'm available to meet with you individually, small groups, however you would wish, whether it's at your home, here at City Hall, nighttime, anything of that nature. I work for you all and with you all. I want to make sure that you understand everything that's in this ordinance, and we'll make whatever time necessary for each of you.
Ken, this is obviously an enormous amount of work you put in here. I guess I got 2 questions if I could. What is the next step, and where are going to be the biggest challenges in implementing such a plan?
The next step is finishing up the development regulations portion. We have quite a few members of our Citizens Advisory Committee as well as Planning Commission members here. We have been working with them throughout this whole process on a page-by-page, chapter-by-chapter process going on close to 2 years now.
That's something I think we would probably have to acknowledge these folks too, because of the work that they've been doing for quite some time on this. And Ken, if you would mention, I'm sure there's some of them that are not here perhaps, because I forgot who was to start with.
The lady on the front is Paige Hatley. She is our AMAC. She is the consultant that has been working with us and helping. Going across, Mr. Rust is on our Citizens Advisory Committee. I guess newspaper reporter behind Mr. Rust. Coming across, Mr. Simple, he is on our Citizens Advisory Committee. Also on the Board of Zoning Appeals. Mark Robillard, he's on the Citizens Advisory Committee. Behind Mr. Robillard is Mr. Kemp, he's on the Planning Commission. Going across, everybody knows Mr. Dobbs, I believe. Behind Mr. Dobbs is Camilla Callis. She is on our Citizens Advisory Committee. Going across the aisle is Mr. Magruder. He's on our Citizens Advisory Committee, Planning Commission. Then we have Stephanie Joyner. I missed her before Mr. Kemp. She has worked with us in regards to the historic preservation guidelines. Then we have Carol Day from our Planning Commission, Pat Gold from the Planning Commission, and last but certainly not least, Mr. Leon Grambling, our newest member of the Canton Planning Commission.
Thank you.
With that, I'm not sure we have time for the historic preservation.
Unfortunately, I don't believe we do. Probably need to schedule that another meeting if we can.
Again, and I didn't pull up the zoning map. I'll meet with anyone individually, collectively, at your convenience to further discussions on this.
Well, are you planning on taking it chapter by chapter, going in detail, or are you planning on, where do we go from here?
We are going to have more meetings and discussions. I would hope that you all would begin going through this a little bit. And as you come across something that you do not understand, if you will call me, email, that sort of thing, let's sit down, talk about it, that sort of thing is what I envision is happening. If mayor and council do want to have work sessions and go over it collectively page by page, we will certainly do that. I'm not sure it's necessary that we go to that amount of detail as what I've spent with these folks in the audience out here. But whatever your pleasure is in regards to this and moving it forward.
Ken, what would be a reasonable target date to say this is done?
I'd like to have it done.
2 years, it's like just.
And we originally envisioned a year. Hold up has been the workload of the city engineer. He is freeing up time to be able to review the development regulations portion of the documents so that we can go to formal advertisements, public hearing, citizen meetings, that sort of thing. I envision us having a little bit of time to sit and talk about the zoning map and what this text and the zoning districts will do in regards to our current zoning map and that sort of thing. I know Mr. Bryan had expressed a desire to look at that in great detail.
Ken?
Yes, sir.
Question again. Target date.
Well, I'm hoping we'll be done by the end of the year, but like I said, the engineer has sort of been stuck in place, if you will, and I've been waiting for comments from the engineer because his workload and all on the chapter that we're working on now since May.
Is the zoning that you're recommending, the type of zoning, is it match up with the county, or do they use a different?
No, so our zoning district designations are consistent with what the county has as far as R40, R20, R15, that sort of thing. Our ORT district is something that the county doesn't have, and the way that we're addressing planned development is slightly different than how the county does it.
ORT is?
Office Residential Transition.
I think we need to, still gonna have to schedule another couple of meetings anyway, because, and maybe we don't need to go over every word, but each council member needs to be able to ask specific questions. And I think the rest of the council needs to hear those questions so that when they come up, we sort of get a consensus of, is this the way we wanna go, or do we wanna amend that and do something else? So it's an awesome amount of work, tremendous amount of work, and it's not something you wanna sit down and read every day, you know. But it's
As I told our citizens committee, it's a good bedtime reading. Something to put you to sleep.
Yeah, I can use this rather
Well,
than
do you
kill.
think it would be a good idea if the council started to review this thing, and then when you had questions, to put them in writing so that we could give them in advance to?
I think it'd be a great idea.
And that way, when we get together, we would have the answers ready, not kind of start fumbling through it.
It's a good idea. But I would say probably, and I'm just throwing this out, council will do what they like here, but I'd say that the next 3 weeks or so, we'll get it again. Maybe 30 days, I don't know, whatever y'all pleasure is. While it's kind of fresh on our mind now, we sort of started the process, we're just going to keep moving until we get it to a point where we'd like to see it. Sorry we didn't get to the historical aspect.
We'll try to do that at the next one, put it first, and then go to questions and that sort of thing after a quick overview of historic preservation ordinances and guidelines.
Could that one section be presented at a regular work session?
It'd probably take about the same amount of time, I would imagine. Historic preservation is something that, if you will, is kind of new to the city of Canton in regards to the creation of the Historic Preservation Commission, having historic preservation guidelines, certificates of appropriateness and things of that nature. Canton has not had that before.
Thank you. Thanks to every one of you too that's been a part of this, because I know it's a lot of work, a lot of extra meetings at night. Thank you very much. Okay. I guess, I don't know if that was an official meeting or not, but we are adjourned, I guess, from that discussion, and we will open the meeting, call the meeting to order here January 31st, 2013. Action on the budget amendment number 6 relating to mayor's staff's budget. Do I have a motion? Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, those in favor, I'll say let's just do a roll call. Mr. Goodman? Mr. Rush? Mr. Cummings?
No.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes.
Mr. Bryant? Yes. Okay, all members voted for the motion with exception of Mr. Cummings. Is there any other business? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.